things that need to be resolved. U.S. government has misbehaved badly in the last 70 years, which, what else is new? Most of the major governments have misbehaved badly. But the American people expect more. We're not the Soviets. We're not Russian citizens at the beginning of the Soviet era, after the Bolshevik Revolution. We're not the people. We're not Chinese living under Mao. We are Americans under a fairly innovative and powerful constitution in a republic with a good deal of freedom. We also have a high opinion of our country. So it's a little different matter regarding America's misbehavior. And so America, there are a lot of other nations out there that will never acknowledge their crimes and misdemeanors. They just won't do it. America should. It will benefit greatly from that. And it will separate us from a lot of other nations, both in the minds of the historians that will try to chronicle all this, as well as the world's people. We need to become a truth-telling nation. And truth is not simply, here's what's happening today, but here's what we did 40 years ago. So many crimes, so many interventions, all for national security. In other words, the Cold War, which is just unprecedented in all of human history, and nobody wanted it. It happened, but it was an ultimate product of nearly 8,000 years of war making. Just warped people's thinking and worldview and government's actions, and it just twisted them into knots. And as a result of this existential threat, many governments just felt they had a license to do whatever had to be done. And as a result, even though we had managed to get past World War II, we continued to misbehave and do awful things, but always justified by national security, and that was always justified by the nuclear threat. So we had a 44-year dysfunctional era. It's like a kid that grew up in a dysfunctional family, but not for 17 years and then left home, but for 44 years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot of damage to be repaired. The United States, of all the countries in the world, the country to have major, how would you say, behavioral problems, this is not the one. But we have sunk to that. So an era of truth-telling, resolution, not an era of litigation and endless recriminations, but rather truth-telling, reconciliation, and so forth, would have a phenomenal impact on our ability to move forward as a global civilization. Because right now, we're not going anywhere. We're going backwards. We've got so many groups and individuals that want to take us back. We've got this politician wants to take us back to 1950. You got another politician who wants to take us back to 1920, and you've got radical religious groups around the world want to take us back to the 11th century. This is a reaction to dysfunction, a failure of belief in a better future. It's frustration, and it's dysfunctional, just like dysfunctional people and families. They can't go forward. They can't function well. They decay. They become addicts. They end up on a street with a little cardboard sign, whatever. This has to change. We're running out of time to make a course correction. Fortunately, we have an event right at our fingertips, which could completely change the course and allow us to go in the direction we need to go. And it starts with one simple but extraordinarily profound truth. My fellow citizens, we have been engaged by extraterrestrials for a long time, certainly 70 years, possibly thousands of years. We couldn't tell you before for national security reasons, but today we are telling you. And thus it begins.
Yeah, but then, you're going to have a certain amount of the population that are going to start, thinking, doomsday too, if it's not worded right. I mean, you got to look at it that way. I mean, they need to at least disclose enough, to let the people either make them feel more comfortable or let them know what's going on if there is going to be a problem.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. After disclosure capital D comes disclosure small d. And what are we going to learn? How much is the government going to reveal? This will be up to the citizens in the post-disclosure world. I certainly will be doing my part. It's going to be an intense, complicated, but fascinating time. It's going to take time for the small d disclosure process to start really registering. Keep in mind, when the government makes the announcement, they're going to have evidence to back it up. They just not come out and say, take my word for it. I mean, there's already plenty of evidence in the public domain, but they'll have their own special private evidence and government-based evidence, and they'll do that. And the fact that some people won't panic, people panic every day. There's nothing new about that. So that doesn't really concern me that much. The truth is not a panacea. It's not a utopian solution. It's just superior to lies. History has made it very clear that the truth process, truth in government, truth in relationships, does not create some perfect world or some perfect relationship. It just has a better chance of a positive outcome than the lies. It's just, in other words, your probabilities are going up. You're working the odds better. You're taking a path that has a higher odds of succeeding. It's like people who go to Vegas and play blackjack with a system where the odds are close to 50-50, and other people go play Keno where the odds are ridiculous, or buy lottery tickets. And so lying is simply statistically superior way to go if you want to be very mathematical and nuts and bolts about it. But it's true. But lying is convenient in the short term. This is the reality of things. You get a short-term benefit from a lie, and in so many ways, and there's so many kinds of lies. Just like you get a short-term rush from an injection of heroin.
Oh yeah.
Long-term, no, it is not better. In long-term, you lose. You get a short-term benefit, long-term detriment. And a long-term existential problem. And again, with long-term heroin, you die. And long-term institutional lying, yeah, you have wars, you have calamities, God knows. I mean, every soldier that died in the Middle East since 2003 from a series of war initiated by a preemptive war of aggression based upon known lies and eventually established lies. That was an existential outcome for them. They were killed by those lies. Had they told the truth, many of those thousands of men and women would still be alive. Well, you can apply that to a global context as well. If we don't get out of the lying business and into the truth business, I assure you the world is not going to end well.
No, and people, because I'm a senior citizen myself. I'm 66. I don't know how old you are, but I find, like I have had people call up on my show. They're all upset about what's going on with Social Security, the major cuts. I mean, without the public even knowing what's going on, they're just doing stuff. People are getting to the point where they mistrust the government more and more. So this is the time they need to, disclose stuff and start being honest with people and let them know what is this going on, be it from something that's visiting our planet or, our politics, the way it's being done. They need to clean up their act big time.
Well, they're not. In fact, the amount of lying is increased. So at this point, we're headed in the wrong direction. And so quickly in the wrong direction that there are alarms going off in various segments, punditry rooms or punditry centers about what could happen. The use of lies to get what you want in terms of politically has just escalated, which is kind of like the addict who is addicted to a substance and can't break it, and so they start taking more and more and more and more and more, and now they're virtually high all the time until they eventually collapse in the middle of the street and die. The last days of the addict's dilemma. Well, America and other governments but let's talk about ours, is addicted to lying now, and it's becoming worse. And the outcome will be similar. There'll be an existential outcome, extremely unpleasant. And as I said, for all the soldiers that have died in the Middle East since 2003, that existential outcome has already arrived.
Oh yeah, and that and it's so sad. I not just because they passed. A lot of them came back Maine and suffering mental problems. All this stuff and you sit back. I remember my days back in the military, back in the Vietnam era. And I got home and I said to myself, why was I even there? Let alone...
Wait a minute. You're saying that you were in Vietnam?
I was in Vietnam, and I don't want to talk about it. It's one subject I don't talk. I will say I was there. It's a long story, but I'll tell you that... when you come back and you were treated not very good by, the population, number one. Two is when you got back, you said, well, I could see, my dad served during World War II and the Korean War, and he had his stories, and he knew why he served. I came back and I go to myself, oh my God, I lost some close friends, and I sat back and wondered why. And it took me years of nightmares of, just to get over it.
Well, I certainly respect what you went through, and am glad that you were able to get past that. One of the things that's it's getting a little bit of attention. You can find the odd article about this. You're going to hear more about it soon, but again, there's just one story in play right now. And that is they're beginning to understand better the moral component of PTSD. In other words, it's not just about I saw something terrible, or I nearly died, or the noise and the turmoil of battle has left me confused. It's also about going through these things, often knowing from the get-go that you did not have the moral ground. And I'll tell you, that just has, and the reason that hasn't been talked about is because if you go there, then you are forced to confront America's misdeeds and misbehavior. And of course, the government doesn't want that, and the politicians don't want that. It doesn't get votes. It's a negative. But it's extremely significant. I can assure you that if somebody literally broke into your house and was attacking one of your family members with a knife, and you pulled a gun and shot them dead, you would have some PTSD afterwards. You would be affected, and you'd be affected a lot, particularly if you've never done it before.
Oh yeah.
On the other hand, if you were out in your car driving on the freeway and somebody cut you off and you lost your temper, and they got out of the car and you got out of the car and you pulled a gun and killed them, and they hadn't even attacked you yet, your PTSD would be much greater, debilitating. Also, you might end up in jail, prison for a long time. In other words, the situation is the same. You killed the person with a gun, but the moral status of your moral status at the time of the act is dramatically different. And unless you're a sociopath with no conscience at all, and there are people like that, and you need to avoid them like the plague, your ability to deal with it will be far more difficult. And so we're starting to see the articles which are essentially addressing this, and whether the government likes it or not, nobody, we don't care. And that is that a great deal of the PTSD that our vets are experiencing is because they were sent out to be involved in immoral government actions, based on lies, based on awful policies, and it's hard to live with themselves. And that is the reason for the high.